Welcome to Holley Terminator X Training Part 12. In this video, we're going to be exploring setting up advanced inputs and configuring them within our software. This is going to be related to things like additional pressure sensors. You might have a coolant pressure sensor, exhaust manifold pressure, that you want to go and monitor that particular channel as the engine is running. Now, we have to know how to set these up in our software. There's extra steps above and beyond what we've learned in our basic sensor setup. There's going to be a completely different area within our actual calibration file that we have to go and turn on, and then going in and learning how to calibrate. Again, there's going to be a ton of things we cover in here, from our basic pressure sensors to flex fuel to shock sensors. Let's jump into our video so we can check all this out. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up our advanced inputs within our Holley Terminator X software. Our advanced inputs are going to be things above and beyond what we have from our basic sensor inputs. We had a specific video setting up and checking our basic sensor inputs previous in our Terminator X training course here. That's going to be found in our sensor area. Things like our map pressure, coolant temp, manifold air temperature. These are core sensor inputs that we have to have regardless of whatever engine we're going to be working with in tuning. Now we have oil pressure and fuel pressure. These are additional sensors that are nice to have, so we can use those in our calibration process and making sure we can set up some fail-safe strategies if we have something like our oil pressure start to drop. But we don't absolutely have to have them as part of the calibration process and making the engine run. Map pressure, coolant temp, manifold air temp are going to be something that we have to have, again, regardless of whatever engine we're working with. Now, the advanced inputs, these are going to be things that we want to go and wire in addition to having our basic sensor inputs. We have 4 total inputs that we can have with our Terminator X system. We'll find that we have the ability to wire in a ground activated switch or a toggle switch. We have a 12 volt activated toggle switch we can work with. We can have a 0 to 5 volt input, so that would be for something like a coolant pressure sensor or exhaust manifold pressure sensor. Or we can also wire in a frequency input that's used for something like a flex fuel sensor or a vehicle speed sensor or a wheel speed sensor or a drive shaft speed sensor. If we want to go and monitor that and use that in some of our advanced programming functionalities we'll talk about a little bit later in our training course here. So let's look at how we can set up our advanced input and outputs. Now, first thing I want to go over here, let's close our basic sensor tab. We're going to go up here into our pin map. We click on our pin map here and we go to view inputs. We're going to see here that we have unassigned inputs. It's going to show us that there's nothing in here because we haven't assigned any advanced functionality and inputs. Now, if we look here under connector J1, that's going to be where we wire in all of our additional inputs to our Terminator X. We can see here we have pin A12, pin A3, A13, and A4. That's input 1 through 4. Now we're going to notice here under input type that this particular input here, input 1, is assigned to AC kick. That's going to be turning up our idle air control motor when the AC is turned on. It's going to act as a countermeasure so that when the AC compressor kicks on, it doesn't drag the motor down, doesn't make it try to bog or stall. We can see it's designated here by a letter G. That's the type of input that we're working with. So if we're taking a look here at any of our inputs, they would have an F, a 5, an H, and a G. The F stands for a frequency type input. That would be for flex fuel, for a wheel speed sensor, or a vehicle speed sensor. A 5 would be for a 5 volt reference sensor. So this is going to be something like a coolant pressure sensor or something like an exhaust pressure sensor. So it would be a typical pressure sensor we would find and work with. The H here is going to be a high side input or a 12 volt input. So if we're wiring in a toggle switch, and that toggle switch is going to be going from one leg of the toggle switch going to a 12 volt, the other leg of the toggle switch wiring in here to our input to turn something on as an input switch, we could set it up here as an H or a high side. And then lastly, the G here would be for a ground trigger input, also known as a low side input. This would be the same thing with our toggle switch. One leg of the toggle switch would go to a chassis ground. The other leg of the toggle switch would go into the pin that we're designating it, and that would be assigned as a G. Now, we can see here, input number 1 is assigned with the letter G. That means this AC kick option, that this particular base map or the base file that I'm working with here, this is designated using a ground trigger input to activate this functionality. So we're going to be finding when we assign a couple different variations here, working with our frequency 5 volt high side and ground, they're going to be popping up here into our unassigned inputs. They will not function and work in our software until we drag and drop them Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.